Hey everybody, I have a video here for you today. Now, I've been wanting to make a video on a certain subject I have been discussing with people for a while, and it just so happens it coincides with the discovery made in Egypt not too long ago, and I've seen a lot of posts and people have made videos about this, and I thought I would talk about this briefly and then add my own 2 cents in on how this site ties in to a confusing Bible verse. People, you should not get your true history from Cecil B. DeMille, but I just want to go over this Associated Press story briefly that people have been quoting here. It says, Egypt's Antiquities Ministry says archaeologists have found a giant fence at the site of an ancient capital city in the northern Nile Delta region dating back over 3,500 years. Antiquities Minister Mamdou El Damadi said on Tuesday that the discovery was made by the Austrian Archaeological Institute. He did not say when the discovery was made. He says the fence from the Pharaonic Middle Kingdom may have been part of a city's wall. The period coincided with the invasion of Egypt of the Hyksos, an ancient Asiatic people. And I have talked about the Hyksos in more than a few videos. If somebody would have asked me a couple years ago if I thought the biblical Exodus was a true story, I would have said definitely not. But all I have researched and read about in the last couple years, there is a story that matches the biblical Exodus story, at least in its foundations. The Hebrews, or the Israelites, were never slaves in Egypt. They were actually the Hyksos people. They were the rulers of northern or lower Egypt, and they left in a mass exodus after they were defeated by the rulers of southern or upper Egypt. They left in a mass exodus. They went north. They were pursued by Pharaoh Amos I. They raided Jericho on their way north. They split into tribes. A faction of them worshipped the golden calf. I believe a group of people, a tribe, could have gone into Baalbek and put in the original foundations of that temple about 1,500 years before the Romans built their temple of Jupiter at Baalbek. And I will mention that a little bit more here briefly. But this site of Avaris, the Hyksos capital, I just want to zoom in, and this is where the ancient site of Avaris, the Hyksos capital, was. And even historians from the time period, such as Manetho, an early Egyptian historian, says that the Exodus story originated out of Avaris, and it involved the Hyksos people. So even historians back then were relating the Exodus story to the Hyksos. And this is where the ancient city of Avaris was. But the Bible, it says that the Israelites, and I'm saying that they, in true history, they were actually the Hyksos people because all the foundations of the Exodus story matches. It says that they built the city of Pithom and Rameses. Now, the city of Ramses was actually ancient Avaris. It just got renamed when Ramses II took over rule. And this is where it was located. And the ancient city of Pi-Ramesses, the city of Ramses that's referred to in the Bible, yes, it was built by the Israelites, or the Hebrews, or as they're known in true history, the Hyksos, because it was their capital city. And nothing remains of Pi-Ramesses today. The Nile Delta flooding and other factors has just led to the city from 3,200 years ago just being buried. And actually, a few centuries later, the whole city was moved up to Tanis when the Nile, this branch of the Nile River that flowed through here in ancient times was rerouted, and they had to move the whole city. And I will leave a link to that fascinating story below. But the biblical story that they built the city of Ramses, yes, they did, because it was their capital city. This is the Hyksos people I'm talking about. This is the location it was in. And people say, you know, where are cities of 10,000 years ago that you talk about? This ancient civilization? Well, we got a city from 3,200 years ago that has all but vanished. And thanks to ground-penetrating radar work And I'll leave a link for this website here. This is The Guardian. And it says radar imaging reveals ancient Egyptian underground city. And this just shows the massive city of a couple 100,000 people is located at this site, and it's all but disappeared today. But the biblical verse that says the Israelites built the city of Ramses, that is confusing. People say, well, Ramses II was the Pharaoh during the biblical Exodus. No, he was not. Once again, you should not get your history from Cecil B. DeMille. The ancient city of Ramses was ancient Avaris, and it was the capital of the Hyksos people. This is where the real Exodus originated from. They left the northeastern Nile Delta area, and they went up into Judea. They crossed the Sea of Reeds, which is right here. They never crossed the Red Sea. The Reed Sea is the correct interpretation from the Bible. It was never the Red Sea. It was the Sea of Reeds, or the Reed Sea, located in the northeastern Nile Delta area. They were pursued. They invaded Jericho. They split into tribes. This happened at the time of the eruption of Santorini. That would account for the biblical plagues. And I just want to read a little bit from this website here about ancient Tanis and Avaris. And this is entitled Tanis, Avaris, and the Land of Goshen. And that's what this area was referred to. And if you remember the biblical Ten Commandments story, the land of Goshen is mentioned. It's the same place. This all ties in together. It says, Avaris had previously been the capital of the Hixos, whose name derives from the princes of foreign lands. The Hyksos rulers had Semitic names, but in 1991, Minoan-style frescoes were unearthed at Hyksos-era palaces on the western edge of the site. And that suggests strong links to the Minoan civilization of Crete, though most still believe that the Hyksos originated in Palestine or Syria. And it says, Avaris existed long before the Hyksos invasion, however, and before finding the frescoes, the team excavated what had been a hilly residential quarter, uncovering grave goods which suggested that the bulk of the population originated from Palestine and Syria. So there is a little bit of confusion, but there is evidence of Minoan influence on the Hyksos, and I say this branch of the Hyksos that worship the golden calf, and that relates to the Ten Commandments or the Exodus story, if they went into Baalbek and they were actually the rulers of northern Egypt, they weren't the slaves. It's a lot easier to get sympathy when you put yourself out as being the slaves and the oppressed, but they were actually the rulers of northern Egypt. And I believe if a branch of them went into Baalbek and they were indoctrinated to all the secrets of ancient Egypt, and they combined knowledge with the Minoans, they could have very well been responsible for those huge megalithic blocks on the original foundation at Baalbek. I thought I would mention that. And then a little while later in this article, it says, this lay above a stratum of evidence for an older, more sophisticated community of non-Egyptians, where 65% of the burials were of children below the age of 2. And people have argued that this kind of verifies the killing of the firstborn story, and that, that's just kind of a strange coincidence, I believe. Or maybe it isn't a coincidence with ancient Avaris and the Exodus story. And the Exodus, and people argue that the Exodus actually occurred during the 13th dynasty, but the Exodus, the expulsion of the Hyksos, was at the very beginning of the 18th dynasty. That is where the true history of an identical story to the Exodus comes from. The Israelites very well could have built the city of Ramses, because it was called Avaris before it was named Ramses by the Pharaoh Rameses II. They're talking about the same place. It was the Hyksos capital, so of course they built it. The Bible is rooted in a little bit of true history, but it's twisted to fit the biblical narrative. That is the route they went on their Exodus. They did not take a many 100-mile detour to cross the Red Sea on foot. That is absolutely ridiculous. The true interpretation is the Reed Sea, and that is located in the northeastern Nile Delta area. I'm done rambling about Egyptian and biblical history. Hope you thought this was interesting. You have a nice weekend.